everyone, it's Mashthestampede from TooStupidGamerz, and this year for our Game of the Year 2024 content, for my solo, would like to cut down a little bit on the script. I tend to go a little bit overboard, and I want to cut as much of that out as I can. But with that being said, I want to just kind of roll right into the list as fast as possible. Couple quick things I wanted to talk about. You know, like every year, I feel like I have less and less time to play games. For me in 2024, this was when I started to get heavy into a decades-old racing simulator that would be iRacing, which also did not help with me getting to play new games. So that's probably why some games you might have expected me to play not on this list. But yeah, regardless, every single year I still look forward to what the releases are for the year. I try to make a plan for upcoming games to make sure that I can carve out a little bit of time in my busy schedule and play a couple of the new games. So for 2024, these are the games that stole my attention and also that I actually got a chance to play. We're gonna count down, then stop for some quick hits, a couple of other categories, and then do our Game of the Year. So hit that subscribe button and let's cue the intro. First up is going to be my honorable mention. Now, this is a series that I have a complicated history with, and but I don't know what it was. Seeing it at New York Comic Con, which funny enough is also an event I have a complicated history with, really reminded me of how deep down I do love this series. And that would be Dead Rising Digital Deluxe Remaster. The remake is good, I just can't justify putting it on my list for Game of the Year since it didn't really accomplish what every remake needs to check off. That is answering the question, does this need to exist? Like, kind of, because redoing it in a new engine should put more power under the hood to have more zombies on screen being decapitated, but then again, changing Frank's voice actor was a bad call, and some other things were changed as well. I'm also just not crazy about the visuals sometimes, and honestly, the last time they did this game remastered was just fine. It wasn't an in-between of a remake remaster like this one was, but it still holds up pretty well. Now, as I said, we will be counting down backwards, so we're gonna start with number 8, and that will be the Tomb Raider collection that came out in 2024. I don't have a whole lot to say about this one, and I don't have a point of comparison because I missed out on the Tomb Raider series as a kid, but I do have to say, this feels like one of those good retro remakes every gamer is gonna want to have part of their collection. It doesn't seem like they changed a lot about it, and it's also super accessible. I love that with the push of a button, you can change between a more retro look and the default modern visuals. This kind of feature is really something these remakes should include. It helps appease the veteran fans, but also appeals to modern new fans as well. For number 7, we have Penny's Big Breakaway. If I had to follow that title with one sentence, it would be this: a game I wish I finished. Seriously, this bad boy released early on in 2024, and it was a big deal for me. This game comes to us from the Sonic Mania dev, and now that we've all given up hope on ever getting a sequel, joining of course the club that also includes holdouts for a New Vegas 2 such as myself, we get to see what the crew behind the best Sonic game in the last decade can do with a fresh new IP. Penny's Big Breakaway feels a lot like Mania, but with Sonic R physics, or more precisely that one Doom mod of Sonic where we get to go all 3D, and it's amazing. And sharing a very special experience with the developer from this game at PAX East 2024, I could not include Shadows of the Damned Hella Remastered anywhere in my solo this year. I had to put it on my list because, again, this is one that I scratched off of my bucket list recently, finally getting to play it. I really enjoyed that one, and here's what I got to say. I loved Suda51's work over the years. Through thick and thin, I'm a Mikami fan, and I love media that leans into the absurd and over the top. So it's an absolute crime I haven't played and beaten Shadows of the Damned yet, but hey, 2024's Hella Remaster was a hell of a time to get around to it. Shadows of the Damned may not go down as one of the greatest offerings from either Suda51 or Mikami, but I gotta say, coolest collab in gaming without a doubt. The story and universe was crazy, the style was there, Damned was dripping with action movie cheese and gore, as well as having incredibly delightful gameplay. Except for the overuse of the darkness sections throughout the game, which became more and more tedious the more the game relied on them, and also possibly just being too short of a game overall, Shadows of the Damned brutalizes in that early 2010 era of epic standalone titles that released with its own badassery. Go play it, My only regret is that I should have gone to the original game, so I could have given more perspective on remake versus the original in this video, but what can you do? And moving on to number 5, I have to say, when it comes to Nintendo taking a chance on one of their pre-existing franchises and forcing a gimmick on us, I'm very skeptical. I was incredibly hesitant on what they were going to do with this next title. I have to admit, the forced gimmick was not so much a rain on a parade as it was a pleasant surprise. And I am talking about The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. This was one of the select few games this year that I really wanted to keep coming back to. Every time that I got done playing this, I was just thinking, wow, I cannot wait the next time I'm going to be able to jump back in for more. And to follow up on the quickscope video from a few months ago, I do still feel a couple of the story choices in this game, like Link's breaking the crystal in the beginning to free Zelda, the King's Push, and even the way Zelda can turn into Link for a brief time to fight enemies, does some injustices to the point of this game. I recognize that after all this time of fans asking for a Zelda game, when Nintendo finally delivered, it probably was never going to be exactly the portrayal the character Princess Zelda really deserves. But that being said, it's not to downplay what this game means to the series. Nintendo crafted an adventure where we get to see Zelda take center stage and be kind of a badass. And that's a good thing. The whole idea behind this game was a very long time coming. People have been asking for this forever. They could have really dropped the ball here, and the fact that Echoes of Wisdom is an amazing game to go through and compares well with the highly regarded Link's Awakening remake is a sigh of relief as a longtime Zelda series fan. And next on the list is number 4, that is going to be RoboCop Rogue Legacy. I was generally impressed with this one. We all know that movie tie-in games get a bad rap since the retro days. Even in like the 2000s, picking up a game that's attached to some blockbuster flick was just gambling with your wallet. So even though I had zero expectations going into 2024's RoboCop, this is one you need to play. For one, it's a hit in the looks department. There are moments I could not believe this simply wasn't a RoboCop movie playing on my screen. The Polish dev studio really did some magic with the visuals on this one. Gameplay was insanely addicting with cool attributes for the character, and clearing areas of baddies honestly never got dull for me. This is probably the best first-person shooter I've played in years, if I'm being honest. For a little bit of context for number 3, Zero, Frank, and myself went to PAX East 2024, and I made it a point to at some point swing by the Games Made in Poland booth at PAX East, where at that point Zero pointed out a car game, because I guess who knew? I guess apparently I'm the car guy on the channel, right? And while I didn't actually get to play the demo, we just did a kind of raw interview with Martin from Serious Sim, where I specifically just asked him to give me the pitch on the game, ask him questions about what players can expect. I put a pin on this game to keep it on my radar and make sure that when it released, I actually got a chance to play it. Well, it released, and I gotta say, this is like a perfect marriage of the Oregon Trail and Driver San Francisco series of games. First off, I gotta say, a game like this has really good replay value because you're getting more or less a unique playthrough each time you load up. I found myself wanting to do all of the encounters just to see how the story and gameplay branches based on those choices. And another personal anecdote is, honestly, I haven't been very excited for a roguelike game in quite some time. The racing mechanics are fun as well. It's super satisfying to pull off an overtake or pass, but it's not totally easy like with the Need for Speed game. I think there's a certain level of car knowledge you do need to be able to drive in this game and avoid crashes. Racing against the fear is an exciting part of this game. It made me reminisce on the fond memories I had of Infamous 2 running away from the beast. And by the end, I really like how the game tallies up all of your activities, accomplishments, and run-ins on your playthrough before you get to advance to the next act. Heading out really made me want to play Interstate 76, which according to the team is a strong inspiration for this. Once again, really good job to this team. I'm excited to see what they do next. And now is going to be for the part of this video, my solo, where we talk about my shoutouts. Shoutouts are going to be games from 2024 that I wanted to play, but I didn't. And right off, we're going to start off with EDF6. I've always heard really great things about this series. Of course, this came out in Japan already in 23, but 24 was the worldwide release. Wanted to play it, didn't. We also have Rita's Rewind. This is the Power Rangers series, the powerhouse show from the 90s, from the early 2000s that people that my generation was obsessed with, is back for a promising looking beat 'em up. Unfortunately, this one came out towards the end of 24 and I just didn't have enough time to fit to it, but I would like to get around to this one pretty soon. And lastly, we also have, I gotta check my notes here, Crow Country. I've been always messing that up since this game was announced. Is it county or is it country? But this is a Resident Evil, old school Resident Evil looking game. It looks beautiful. I've heard nothing but good things about this. Even though it released early in the year and I had no excuse to do it, I guess I was just kind of waiting until the Halloween season, but unfortunately I didn't get around to it. When that thing hits a nice sale, I'm totally gonna get this. But yeah, Crow Country, that's definitely up my alley. And the last 3 shoutouts are gonna go to Stalker 2, which, since I didn't play the first game yet, I didn't get the sequel. Stellar Blade. At the time the game came out, I didn't have a PS5, so unfortunately couldn't play it. And last but not least, we have Metal Slug Tactics, which I think there's, why is this on my shoutout and not on my actual list? Oh, that's right, that's because I got Unlimited Run and I'm still waiting for it, which is gonna come out soon, I'm sure. Oh, that's interesting. I got some mail. Let me take a look at what this, yeah, yep, okay, all right, yeah, well, I will be playing Metal Slug Tactics 2028. I'll let you guys know how it is then. And before we finish out this video with my game of the year, my runner-up, I just want to acknowledge the fact that whenever we do these, I really don't get to do worst game of the year anymore. You know, if there's a best game, surely there's also a worst game of the year. That doesn't really happen as much. So let me just go ahead and invent a category for this time. That's going to be the early access category, the best early access game for 2024. Because let's be honest, there are a lot of times where we do these videos and there's a game that totally needs to be featured in our solos, in our categories, but unfortunately it didn't actually fully release in this year. For me, for 2024, the best early access game that I played is going to be Hellskate. Again, very interested in this game. You guys will be seeing more on that for sure. But it didn't come out in 2024, only early access. Once again, I got to talk with the devs for this game back at PAX East to pick their brains a little bit. You can watch that video. I'll try to link it in the description. You know, we got to find out a little bit about what went into this project, and the PAX demo convinced me that when this leaves early access and becomes a full game, be it 25 or 2026, editors know it actually already came out 2025, January 2025. This is going to be a beast. So watch out for it, and watch out for it on this channel. And in the meantime, you can still check out our interview for more info. For now, that's all I'm gonna say about Hellskate. Let's move on to the next section. Okay, so before we get started with the game of the year versus the runner-up, I just want to explain real quick kind of how this works. What I tend to do is I will pick two of my favorite games from the year, and I will pit them against each other. There will be one game of the year and there will be one runner-up. There are no ties. This is a win or lose, all or nothing. Winners, losers, no draw situation. So that's kind of how this is going to work. And just for context, the way that this year's runner-up versus game of the year ended up being is very reminiscent of a prior game of the year video that we did many years ago. I'll get more into that later, but yeah, I had pitted these two franchises against each other, so it was very interesting to see. Anyway, we're gonna start off with the runner-up, which is Persona 3 Reload. That is the remake for Persona 3. Persona 3 is a series I have a long history with. Now, I played almost all of FES, Persona 3 FES for the PlayStation 2. That was on the classics. I played on my PS3, and I played a tiny bit of Persona 3 Portable. That's my entire history playing Persona 3. Now, that might influence how I feel about this remake, and if I say something that doesn't make sense to you, it's a possibility that that's why. Again, with the Persona franchise, they tend to do a lot of different versions of these games, Persona 3 being no exception. So normally what happens when a game company goes in and remakes a game is, you know, there will be updates to visuals, music, there's a lot of quality of life changes that you can expect when you get a remake. The thing is, sometimes with all of these changes, it ends up scrubbing away that memory you have playing the original game. So in like a perverse way, while you've technically improved the game, you've technically created a better version of the game, you're now removed from the original experience that you had. By fixing all of the things that were wrong with the original, it's not the same anymore. It's its own new thing. You know, it's always on the back of my mind is, will this be better? Do we need this? These are all things that come to mind whenever a remake comes out. Well, strap in, folks. I, Mashthestampede, am about to speak very highly of a remake. You see, this is the first time, as far as I'm concerned, we have a complete version of Persona 3 with no issues. Again, my history of Persona is that I primarily played FES, and as much as I love FES and I prefer the 3D world that you can navigate, FES had one fatal flaw. You cannot control your companions. They act on their own, and the allied AI is awful. You will get to a point in FES where you are standing on your last leg and you're going to basically be done in by the actions of your stupid computer-controlled party members. This was my experience with FES. This is the reason why I never was able to finish Persona 3 in the past. On the flip side, Persona 3 Portable, from what I've heard, is probably the better version of the game to play. It's certainly more playable. But then going from being able to experience the 3D environment that you get in FES to now having to only jump between locations, I just can't come to terms with that step down. So for me, up to this point, there has not been a great version of Persona 3. And I've always viewed Persona 3, 4, and 5 in their own category. To me, in my mind, they're separate from 2 and 1. Now that Persona 3 Reload, the remake, is here and I've played it, I can finally say that Persona 3 is as good as 4 and 5, if not better. The most important thing this remake fixes, that is not being able to direct allies in combat, is a quality of life change that takes Persona 3 from the Stone Age to the Jetsons. You no longer have to decide if you want to have full party control with real-time map exploration being gutted, or really cool visuals, a more immersive world to check out, but the fatal flaw that you can't control your party when you're fighting. Another important part that they fixed, everyone's biggest complaint: Tartarus feels way more interesting from the go. Instead of having almost exactly the same wallpaper dungeon to grind through the majority of the game, each level of Tartarus is crafted to be unique, and they do not disappoint. You know, it's funny for someone like me to be saying this, but I'm so glad that they made this nothing like the original. Seriously, original Tartarus was the worst dungeon out of the 3 most recent Persona universes. They were certainly keenly aware of how much Persona 3 needed to be updated and changed up. So much so that they mix up certain musical aspects of the game so you don't always hear the same songs. The new songs they added are really nice. For instance, the alternative song to Mass Destruction, switching between both for combat, is great. I still prefer Mass Destruction, but the new track is a fantastic fit for this gameplay. On a personal note, I was also really happy that they went back and got Lotus Juice to do some of the tracks as well, keeping with that original feel of the soundtrack from the original games. This game also feels beefier. At times, the old Persona 3 felt like there wasn't a whole lot to do or occupy yourself with, but not in the remake. And it's awesome because it makes you feel like you're living in this world. It's so realistic because there's just so much stuff to do. Now I have to get into some nitpicks. Some of the AI is still bad. It's very easy to juke your enemies to the point that it became my go-to move while dungeon crawling. After you get to a certain point in the game, you can start to feel like there are less and less things for you to do since the story is winding down to a close, and thus, contrary to the earlier comment I made, getting through the days becomes a bore at the back portion of the game. I remember feeling really impatient around this time and just kind of wishing the story would speed up and just get to its dramatic climax already. Now, freshly after beating the game, I just could not stop thinking about it. The story broke me a little, and I was so bummed out playing that later part of the game, knowing that A, it was all coming to an end, and B, the world was just so bleak to walk around. You know, despite doing everyday normal things, the world basically became an apathy syndrome ghost town, and it filled me with this weird mix of dread, but also calmness because we're just like walking around shops buying crap. Also, spoilers, but the story in Persona is divided into the journey and the answer. Of the 3 Persona games I played, Persona 3 is definitely hands down the most bleak and heavy hitting with its story. And this is the ultimate reason. In the answer, the protagonist is supposed to die. The end of the journey is actually very somber, but in Persona 3 Reload, they took the answer out. That is, until they added it back with the DLC. Without knowing about the journey answer from previous versions of Persona 3 that I played, I'm not sure if I would have liked the ending of Persona 3 Reload as much. It would just have like an odd tone by the end of the game, and maybe even a bit confusing. But that's all I have to say about Persona 3 Reload, and like I said, it was my runner-up. The reason why this game was my runner-up was because of the fact that there really was no reason they couldn't have just made you be able to control your allies in FES. If that was a thing, I would have already finished Persona 3. I possibly wouldn't have gotten the remake, and I already would have probably said Persona 3 FES, one of my favorite RPGs of all time. I can't think of any reason that they couldn't have done that. It's not like it was an action RPG where all the characters are fighting at the same time. It was turn-based, so I don't see why you couldn't have just controlled your own characters. For that reason, Persona 3 Reload feels like a bandage for what Atlus should have just gotten right in the first place. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a golden bandage that fills you with euphoria. I would play this game any day of the week, but at the end of the day, it's still just making up for the flawed history of this Persona game. Which, of course, leaves me with my game of the year for 2024, and that is going to be, you already saw it, Ys X Nordics. Finally, after 8 years, my Game of the Year solo came down to a rematch, and this time, when I pitted Persona versus Ys, Ys came out on top. It's funny to think how much time has passed, and how differently I view Persona 5 and Ys 8 at this time. And it's funny to think about how, oh, here we are again, battling 2 of my favorite RPG franchises. And while then I had to pick Persona 5 because to me it was just a flawless title, now a flawless title isn't going to come out on top as my game of the year, but I still had to pick Ys X Nordics, a fantastic title, over Persona 3 Reload, and here's why. Finally, after Ys 8, which to me personally was not exactly what I wanted, then Ys 9, which I loved but needed a couple of improvements, we get Ys X Nordics. It feels different. I would say that Ys 8 is probably still the best Ys game for first-timers in the series to pick up, maybe Origin, maybe even Calcutta. But Ys X is great, and I think this could be the next title that you say that if you never played a Ys game, just go pick up Ys X Nordics. It does a good amount of refreshing of the series to match it up with modern JRPGs' expectations, but at the same time, it doesn't take away from that overall experience of playing a Ys game. Now, do I wish Adol didn't have any voice lines? Yes, but it's minimal enough that I can still tolerate it. Do I miss the swapping party character mechanics that we had in the past? Yes. But the system that they gave us was really good to make up for it. So from the pros of this game, again, I said this before, I gave it my best visual. The game looks really good running on PS4. It runs mostly well without any major bugs, not too many issues with the frame rate either. And then on PS5, it shines like a diamond. I think of the most recent Ys games, this is the best looking game. This game has the best effects with amazing visuals, vibrant, tons of color all around the islands, and they also maintain some cool, gritty, dark dungeons. Most importantly, I think there is really good story. The plot hooks you very quickly and keeps major story events quick and interesting. I think that for the most part, the character development was better in prior games, especially in 9 since most of your party had a magnifying glass on their backstory, but they made Nordics to be a grand epic adventure, a return to what made Ys great. And I can't tell you how many times I thought I knew where the story was headed, but they subverted my expectations. And every time that happened, it was like a cool new direction. There are also fun gameplay mechanics that are, as previously mentioned, new to the Ys series, and I think fans will love the combat. Yes, there will still be some holdouts, but I have to be honest, I'm impressed with how quickly the combat grew on me. By the end, I already forgot that we used to play these games with 5 or 6 rotating members because I was just so into the duo combat. Now for some cons, the dialogue sometimes is a little too long. For example, they could get the point across with a few less lines. I know I feel about as qualified making this statement as a pot calling the kettle black. Instead, a lot of the dialogue takes much more to get through during several of the less important cutscenes. Though to be honest, I'm feeling this way about a lot of RPGs lately. Now, while the sailing was great, I still can't help but think of other games where you get to do that, like Wind Waker or Assassin's Creed Black Flag. And because of that, by comparison, I feel like the sailing and the game world could have used more of a regular night-day cycle and some varied weather. There was nighttime sailing, and we even had weather events while sailing, but it was only for specific moments in the game. At all other times, when you're exploring on the sea, it's just sunny and clear. This is not a major thing, just something that really felt missing from the total equation. Now, in conclusion, I just can't express how much I am satisfied with Ys Nordics. Again, just to make a couple of quick big points here. When this game first came out, they said, guys, this is going to be a different game. Expect changes because they're going to be changing a couple things in this game. And yet, it still feels like a really good fit with the last two games that came out in this series. Honestly, it feels like a much more expanded 8 in terms of what you can do, like where you can go, exploration, and how much area you're actually able to visit overall. There really never was a dull moment playing Nordics. With a ton of extra content and just how much fun I had, this game would be a real treat to do a platinum run on. Sometimes it sucked having to go through a lot of extra tutorials because there was way more that they had to explain in this game than prior games, since it's such a different formula, but it was totally worth it. Having all the different varieties of gameplay, having all the different types of things that you could do in this game made this the most enjoyable gaming experience I had of 2024. And again, it's not a perfect game by any means. There are some flaws as well. I felt like with the ship combat, as good as it was, I enjoyed the ship combat so much, but by the end of the game, your ship is so much more powerful, none of the enemies can really stand a chance to you. So I'm not complaining about being this Godzilla tank running around the ocean, but it felt like there was a little bit of missing challenge after you got a certain amount of upgrades for your ship. The pacing was also fast, maybe just a little bit too fast. By the time I got to the end of the story, it really felt like we just breezed through the story. We didn't stay in one area for too long, and we definitely could have used more character development. So there was no time when I felt seriously let down as a Ys fan with Nordics. It ran really well despite my geriatric PS4 Pro not really being able to hold up. Yeah, I just thought this game was put together really well, and we finally got a great Ys sequel that I can be excited about. No strings attached. This is just the sequel I wanted. Finally, the sins of 8, in my opinion, not really being so great, and 9 being good, but just being way too buggy, and they probably should have spent more time on. That's all been washed away. That's all made up for now. We have the sequel that Ys fans should really have nothing to complain about. And the question is, what next? I mean, I've said this multiple times on this channel in the past. I would be more than happy if they could give us another Ys game in the old style. I know that Falcom has really accomplished a lot with this series in the last couple of years. So the question is, what do they plan on doing? They have unfortunately announced that they will be going on hiatus with the Trials in the Sky series. So it's only a question of what they're going to intend to do with this legendary classic JRPG series that totally deserves love. It deserves to have just as many sequels as all these other JRPG series out there. What will be the next chapter in Adol's story? What will be the next book in the Ys series? Because every Ys game is considered its own book. I can't wait to find out. I'm a huge fan, and the overall satisfaction that I have playing Ys Nordics is why I decided to make this my 2024 Game of the Year. And that is gonna do it. Once again, guys, I probably went way over than I had intended to. You know, I'm sorry about that. I tend to ramble quite a bit, but it's because I love the games. We're all about the games here at TooStupidGamerz. We hope you guys are. If you enjoyed this video, definitely make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know in the comments below what you think. Yeah, let us know if you agree with my picks, and we will see you guys on for another video very soon. Again, congratulations to all the great developers that got awards in our categories this year. Congratulations to Ys Nordics and Falcom. I do hope we get a sequel soon. And to Atlas as well with Persona 3. Fantastic game, my runner-up. Anyway, I'm Mashthestampede. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.